Benton, can you please go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience today?
Yeah, so Raul, thank you so much for doing this. It's always a pleasure to talk to Simon MBAs about, just my experience and the job search. So I'll start by giving a quick background on who I am, what it is that I do, and then we can dive into today's agenda. So I'm going to share my screen with you because I do have a presentation prepared to take you through. So I am an international student, or I came to the US as an international student, like most of you. I'm originally from Jamaica, and I decided that I wanted to do a career pivot, and an MBA was the most logical choice to make that pivot from my background in digital marketing and PR. So I decided to join the Simon Accelerated MBA program in 2013, and that was quite an experience. It was 18 months of intense goodness, meeting really awesome people from all over the world. And, I remember distinctly that maybe 3 years ago, I was sitting in the same place you were, where, for some of you, it might be finding an internship. For others, it's you're coming to the end of your Simon journey and you're thinking about what's that next big thing. So I was there thinking about, where am I going to end up, after making such a huge investment. And fortunately, I did end up landing an offer maybe 3 or 4 days after graduating from Simon, actually, to work with a fintech startup based out of San Francisco. And for those of you who might be interested in the startup environment or in sort of technology, modern finance, you may be familiar with social finance. So that was the name of the company that I worked for. And it was an incredible opportunity. I worked there as a career strategist and coach. And that exposed me to working with MBAs, PhDs, and normal professionals across multiple industries and backgrounds from Ivy League companies like Google, HP, etc. And I spent a big part of my time actually coaching and advising around the job search process. And recently I decided to transition from SoFi, and I've started my own private coaching practice, which my goal is to help mid-career professionals stand out in the workplace so that they can be promoted faster and earn more. And that's simply helping clients to navigate organizational politics or to network internally or to enhance their leadership skills or their personal brand so that they can use that to climb the ladder much faster. I'm also a CPBS, which is a certified personal brand strategist. And I'm part of a very small group actually across the US who is certified to deliver coaching around personal branding, and that has become a huge term for a lot of people. All right, so now I do want to declare upfront what it is that I'm going to talk to you about. So my goal is to share with you a 4-step framework for conducting your job search. And I'll focus on your mindset, which is a really, really big part of that equation. Being really clear on what it is you offer through your value proposition and sharing an approach. And I call it the blue collar approach, which is something that's going to keep you accountable and drive results for you. And then finally, the piece around performance, and that's going to be in your interviews or the informational conversations that you might be conducting. Now, I want to be really clear on some expectations for today. So I know most of you have gotten tons and tons and tons of advice on how to conduct the job search, which is perfectly fine. The reality is that jobs is a very straightforward process. My goal is not to get into the weeds with you. So I'm not going to tell you that you need to do this to your resume or you need to have 20 conversations per week. I'm going to keep this conversation at a really high level by sharing something that I've either used myself or I've used with clients and it has proven to deliver really good results. in their job search. If you do have specific questions though around maybe a particular tactic where you perhaps want to get a perspective on, then definitely feel free to send that question to Rahul, and I'll be more than happy to answer based on the time format that we have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so something that's incredibly important, and I call it my mantra. You probably might have heard this, in other places, but when you think about the job search process, a lot of people think that, you know what, I need to get the job on the first shot. So I'm going to send out 10 applications, for example, and I need to get something after sending out those applications. But the reality is, it doesn't always work that way. And what's going to be very important is understanding that your goal in searching in a really competitive market, because I would say, as MBAs, for example, or master's students, you're a part of a really small and ultra competitive pool. So it's not always going to happen on the first chance. So it's important that you focus on making progress and not being perfect, because that's what's going to hold you back. Also understand that you probably are going to fail in your job search. In other words, you're not going to get the job the first time around, which is fine. So you want to give yourself permission to try things, to put yourself out there, fail really hard, fail fast and fail hard, and learn from those opportunities. Which brings me to the first step in the framework, the four-step framework that I'm sharing with you. And it's this whole idea about mindset. Now, I will tell you that I've had scores and scores of clients who, they'll tell you that I'll spend a lot of time just on helping them to reframe the way they think about their job search and what their success looks like. The reality is, job search, it's a very basic process. It's really straightforward. There are just a couple of things that you can do to conduct a job search. Many people think that there is a magic bullet formula you need to use to land a six-figure job, but the work that you're going to be doing is really basic work. It's just a matter of how you view that work that you're doing. So I usually reference the work of Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist, and she's written this incredible book about mindset, the new psychology of success. And if you have yourself at the time, you can definitely grab and read. Now, the idea is that we have two types of people. You have people who have what is called a fixed mindset. So in the job search process, a fixed mindset person may think, for example, that, you know what, I really want to make a transition from marketing to financial services, for example. And deep down, that's what you care about, but you're thinking, I won't be able to make that transition because I don't have the skill sets. I don't have what it takes. And what does that do? It creates a block. And you're stuck. You're not making any moves. You really want it, but you just don't know how, because you think that, your skills and abilities, they're finite. As opposed to someone with a growth mindset who sees every failure, every challenge, every obstacle as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to get in closer to your big obstacle. So what does this mean for you right now? You are probably working really hard, which is understandable. You're probably getting into results, but you're also probably getting a lot of no's, which is fine. I would recommend that you start stepping back, and from each no you get, or from each lack of response that you might get from reaching out to contacts, how can you sort of grow from that experience? What it is that you can do differently? How does this put me closer to what I want? Because you might just realize that out of that fixed mindset, you might realize that the target you're targeting is not the right target, and that's an opportunity for you to refocus or recalibrate your efforts. So reframe your thinking about what it is that you can and cannot do in your job search. There's an abundance of possibilities. I know too, for some international students, there are sort of regulations around companies that sponsor. I won't get in the weeds for this, but I've been, the company, my example, for example, is initially I was told that SoFi would not sponsor. That's something they would ever do. And yes, I had an advocate who was there and was very supportive of me in the process, but I also recognized that I wanted to take a chance because there is an opportunity. I see where I could do incredible work. I see where I could make things better for them. And so I decided to take the leap. Someone with a fixed mindset might think, you know what, this is not going to work out. So I'm just going to not accept this opportunity. I'm going to look at other companies that traditionally sponsor. So you want to be really clear on how you view certain circumstances. Now, the second phase in my approach to job search, once my clients are very clear on their mindset, I usually focus on value proposition. And many of you hear this term a lot. You probably might hear it in marketing. It's becoming more and more common in the job search market, or even if you've done internships, you probably might hear this being thrown around fairly frequently. But the idea is you want to be very, very clear on what it is that you have to offer. And this is something you want to get right before you start your job search, because it's a transactional process, and it doesn't matter what you might be told. It goes back to the idea that your skills and your services, they're being bought, and you want to think about, how can you be the right answer for whomever or whatever types of roles are you going after. And something that you want to do is you want to focus on, I call it the goal beyond the goal. So you might want to focus on your industries or functions, pain points, or some of the pain points that the managers might typically face, or depending on the types of company you're looking to get into, like what opportunities are they really going after, and become very clear on how you're the answer. So it's not just about the years of experience that you have, or the credentials, for example, like your MBA or some sort of technical certifications, but it's also about how you deliver what it is that you do. So you might have two MBAs who they're exceptional financial analysts. They have comparable experience, but a company is going to choose maybe the MBA, for example, who has a really great knack for asking questions. So you might be a questioner. That's a part of you and how you do things. Or they might choose the other MBA who happens to have a great sense of humor. They find value in that. They want people who are lighthearted, for example, who can get along with the multiple departments that they are working with. So the idea is you want to know yourself, and you want to know what you offer and how you operate. And that way, once you're clear on that, you want to ensure that you don't sort of get too convoluted. Now, I've seen a lot of people who probably, you want to sound really technical, or it might be very philosophical, or whatever it is, but you use a lot of language that most people, they just want to hear how you can help them, or how you're going to make their lives better. So being super clear and not necessarily cute or trying to sound smart is important. And consistency as well is key. So consistency across all your brand collateral. So your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your networking pitch, the in-person conversations that you have, the types of recommendations that you have, all those things need to be aligned with your value proposition. So just a quick step on how you can think about your value proposition going forward. You might want to think about what it is. So who do you help? So you help X person to solve Y goal. So that might be the big sort of common goal you might see, for example, in the job description. But then you help them so that something in particular can occur. So that's the goal beyond the goal. And what I want you to, or what I would encourage you to do, is to start to think about maybe the dream that the department you're looking to get into, the dream that they want. Probably, if you're into digital marketing, it might be that they want to attract more customers so that they can, reach their profits faster. Or if it's operations, maybe the operations VP want to know that he can go to bed at night without worrying about, what a manufacturing plant might experience tomorrow. So really start thinking about the dream that your audience care about, or the pain that they might be facing, and how you are perfectly positioned to solve that.
Mm-hmm.
So just some two quick examples of value proposition. So one here is work with a client who's in digital marketing, and her value prop was very simple. She designed and implemented digital marketing campaigns for tech startups. So she was very specific about who she's targeting and what. But the dream, though, is that these tech startups, they want to attract their first 10,000 customers, for example, or their first 20,000 customers. So when you walk into an interview, for example, and you start speaking very clearly what you can deliver, or when you start having informational conversations, I know a lot of people are concerned about how do I, self-promote without coming across as boastful. Then your value prop is what's going to help you, because you know exactly what you're positioned to deliver and how. So you can start offering like really clearly, what it is that you have to offer, and how you can support that person, for example. And it's a similar framework that applies if you're internal and you're looking to get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
You know exactly how you can help others. Another example is for someone who's in data analytics. So I build powerful statistical models for healthcare companies so that they can save million more lives, right? So that's the impact of their work. So that's the goal beyond the goal. So think really clearly about who you want to serve, for sure, and what it is that you have to offer them. And what's the goal behind the goal that they're going to accomplish. So that's your value proposition. Now, the third step to conducting your job search is what I call it's a blue collar approach. So you think about doing a blue collar job. It's something that it's very structured, very regimented. You do the same thing over and over. I think the job search approach, or your overall strategy to job search, is pretty similar to doing a blue collar job. So one, you want to have some structure to your search. What does that mean? Now, you want to be doing things such as conversation. So you want to be talking, because you probably might have seen from the research that somewhere north of 80% of jobs, if you're looking for work here in the US, you get through conversation. So you want to have, a weekly or monthly plan for conversations. How many people do you want to talk to per week? You also want to have a plan for things like how many applications do you need to send out to get a call back. So this is where like your statistical skills, for example, that you've learned at SAMA will come into place, almost like sales. So you might realize that you have a response rate of 20% from applications, resumes that you send out. So, okay, that if it's maybe 4 applications you need to get a call back from, then probably you need to send, let's say, 20 or 30 applications out per week to ensure that you maintain that level of response. Because at the end of the day, structure is going to give you activity, and activity is going to help to drive results. So, you design your own process. There's no magic bullet to doing that. You want to do something that works for you. It's also something that's going to keep you accountable, because there are going to be times when you might be just frustrated or you might be overwhelmed. So you need to have things where you can just tick off and you can do automatically. That moves you closer to your goal. Now, the other thing that I think it's very important, especially for MBAs, of timing. So most international students, as you probably might start realizing, is that you aren't necessarily going to land a job during the typical on-campus recruiting. You're typically going to get hired more quickly in the just-in-time market. And that usually starts somewhere between, let's say mid-March, and that might go up to June, for example. And, you also want to understand that the timeline, a typical company in the US takes somewhere from 6 to 8 weeks to hire someone. So with that said, you want to design mini campaigns to go around the time periods when job search are usually at its highest. Of course, you're probably going to be searching all through, but you want to intensify your activities around certain peak periods. So what you might think about is, you know what, I know as an international that a lot of openings, a lot of just-in-time opportunities are going to be between March and June. Your goal, once you start, Simon, for example, or if you're in your first year, is you want to spend time maybe between September to January or February, simply building relationships with companies that you care about or you're interested in. And then once you're in that just-in-time market, now you want to become really intense and focus with your job search. You'll already have leverage. You have advocates who can push your application forward. So there are certain peak periods as well for getting internships. Usually that's going to be somewhere between September to December. You want to run a job search campaign around that. Now, the timing of your campaign or how long your campaign is, that's something that's completely up to you. What I do recommend, however, is probably not do a campaign less than 6 weeks. Because you want it to be something that's realistic, that gives you the time to put in an application and go through the full process, interviewing, perhaps, or doing multiple interviews, getting an offer, negotiating, and that's probably going to take a little longer than, let's say, a month. So somewhere north of 6 weeks is usually a good timeline. It's also important that you track and measure what you're doing. And this is the biggest frustration that I've gotten from clients who come to me for support their own job search. They are doing exceptional work, but the reality is they're not really tracking or measuring their progress. So because their sole goal of success is on ultimately getting the job, which there isn't anything wrong with that, you might find that you're doing incredible work, but if you're not tracking and seeing where things might be missing, you don't know how you're going to fix it. So, for example, you might realize that you're sending out a lot of applications and you're advancing, you're getting to final round, but you're just not converting those final round interviews. Then that's probably where you want to spend time, improving there, as opposed to probably going to try to change your LinkedIn or change your resume because you're being picked up. It suggests that there's interest in your background. Hiring managers are obviously interested in you. So you might find that the challenge is around building the chemistry and the relationship. So you might want to spend time fixing that. Or you might realize that, I'm sending out a lot of applications, but I'm not getting any callbacks. Then you may want to look at your application strategy. So are you applying to the right jobs? Are you doing enough activities? So in other words, are you having conversations? Are you following up on those conversations? Are you aligned on the types of opportunities that you're applying to? Or you might find that you are not getting past the first one. So you get the phone screen, but you're just not getting past that. So what's the challenge? Are you talking about your background the right way when you speak to a recruiter? Like, are you focusing on the skills and the competence that you can deliver? Are you handling the money question properly? Because that's a big one that gets a lot of people eliminated. So the idea is have a clear outline on how and when you want to track and measure your progress for your job search on your own terms, and of course sort of setting different indicators of success. Now, the final step in this process to landing your job is this, what I call your peak performance, and this has nothing more to do than with in-person conversations that you're going to have. So it might be the informational interviews that you're doing, or the actual job interviews, or the super dates that you might be going to. And I know that there's a typical focus on what I'd call the competence piece, so what you can do and deliver, which is important, but also recognize that people make decisions on emotions, so they want to connect with you. So there are a couple of things that I recommend. Usually before actually walking into an interview, especially a high-stress one, which we know is very common for MBAs, you probably want to visualize what peak performance looks like for you. So something that I usually do with my clients, and it has proven powerful, especially recently for a client I had who is from Haiti, but she's been here for a while, and he's had a tough time in closing final interviews. And we had a visualization technique where I sort of bring him back to a time when he was at his best in an interview. What was he feeling? What was he seeing? How did he enter the room? Sort of recapturing that high point for him. And in doing that, he realized that there was one thing that was holding him back from really closing the deals on interviews. And it was simply because he bought into this mindset that, he needs to follow a super regimented framework in how he was answering his behavioral questions and how he talked about his experience. So he wasn't being him. He wasn't being authentic. And he was able to break that barrier and recognize that he interviews best extemporaneously, as opposed to trying to memorize stuff and using, like a car or star framework, which really people weren't connecting because they realized that he wasn't being who he was. And he simply tapped into that image and used that for his next interview, and he's landed a job, and that was just a very simple and subtle change that he made to his job search. So visualizing what peak performance looks like, that's something that's really important. Now, it sounds like a very soft approach, but it really does work. And it doesn't matter if you are, into something that might be very logical, or, it might be something that's psychological. It works. Energy is also very important. And this goes back to the whole idea of connecting. Now, another typical advice that I got, and I've seen in a lot of literature around job search, is that you want to match your interviewer's energy, which to some extent this might be true, but it might also be dangerous, because you might just walk into a room where the person you're interacting with has a lot of what I call catabolic energy. So it's very negative, destructive, and you go down there with them, sometimes you shift your energy level and you move it, and it creates a disastrous chemistry, because it might repel, as opposed to if you walk into an interview very positive, very focused, we're in this for a win-win opportunity, I win, you win, that sort of thing. People do feed off that energy, so you have the power to change the energy in your favor by just simply shifting your energy level to one that's more positive and opportunistic. It's also important that you focus on building trust first. And for those of you who might be following, let's say, the work of Amy Cuddy, you might realize that when people meet you, especially for the first time, they go through two aspects of what she calls social judgment. So the first is they're trying to assess, do I like this person? Which in other words is, can I trust this person? And the second is they're assessing your competence. So can they respect you? And that's where the decision around, if they should hire you or if you'll be able to deliver the goods on the job becomes very important. However, what's really important is before they can decide if you're competent, they need to trust you first. So it's important that, those sort of icebreakers, building a relationship, the chemistry, your positive energy, that's really important. I know some people are probably all business and they want to get down to the details, but that might not work in your favor. Your presence is also important. And the idea is that, again, people are making decisions based on emotions. They're making decisions based on who they're seeing. So it's very important that you're confident in what you're delivering. Your body language is in sync with what it is that you're saying. You feel really passionate about what it is that you're talking about or the job you're going after, which is why the piece around figuring out what it is that you truly care about and decide on your dollar prop, that piece of work is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where that level of passion, that level of enthusiasm, that level of you being really confident about what you have to sell becomes very important. And always remember that at the end of the day, your value is always going to be on the table. So what it is that you can do for me? How are you going to make my life easier?
Mm-hmm.
So, from the perspective of your value proposition, you should be prepared in very different circumstances to talk about how are you going to meet that goal beyond the goal of your interviewers in the process and hopefully close the deal for your job offer. Now, I would recommend one book if you have time again. It's called Own the Rule, which is a brilliant book. It covers a lot of things, presence, selling your value proposition, sort of speaking and working with senior leaders, which most of you might be doing now in your job search. So you probably are speaking to people who are fairly senior in the organization.
So I have a question for you on that. Say when you're talking to someone on the phone for, I don't know, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and you said that you're trying to establish that trust and confidence. What are some of the things you can do in that such a quick phone call?
If you want to establish confidence,
trust, you spoke about establishing that trust that somebody has in you. So when you're on a phone call, how can you do that? Because you're not able to see the person. They're not able to see you, all that stuff.
Yeah, so great question. First of all, once you get on that call,
mm-hmm.
It's important before you dive into the details that you come across as someone who is enthusiastic, you're warm, you're curious, so you're asking questions, you're spending time on the icebreaker. So really trying to learn a little more about the person, being genuinely curious about who they are,
mm-hmm.
and that's where your research might come into play. So you might realize that the contact you're talking to is someone who is into soccer.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to spend a little time trying to build that chemistry and relationship around or if you have an interest, I usually recommend finding mutual interest. So something that you care about and that person care about, and you can do research.
Mm-hmm.
It's also important too that you actually listen. No, not listen on what I would call an objective level, where you're there, you're processing the information, but you're listening intuitively. So you're processing what the person is saying,
mm-hmm.
but you're also processing their tone. Do they sound excited? Do they sound worried or frustrated? So trying to pick up on those emotions
mm-hmm.
and then reflecting that back to people, because now they show that you actually care about what they're saying, because people want to be listened to,
sure.
And you want to show that you're actually doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah, we can get back to your presentation about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was it really. Now
okay.
I'm open to the questions that you might have.
An interesting question that I have is so you mentioned about working with a fintech startup, and it's a known fact that it's much harder to get a sponsorship, and even the probability is low in a startup versus any bigger firm. So if you can talk a little bit more to your experience, how were you open up to working with startups, and how did that work out for you?
Yeah, so do you want me to talk about my actual job experience, or do you want me to talk about the process that I went through?
The process that you went through more, and then a little bit about the job experience as well.
Yeah, so I'll start with how I actually landed in a fintech startup. So coincidentally, in my year, I was probably one of the few people who was interested in the talent development HR space. So
mm-hmm.
I knew that I had my work cut out for me. I had to have a lot of conversations, and my former boss, who hired me for this fintech startup, actually, I met with him to talk about something completely different. I was talking to him about getting into talent acquisition, because he had worked as an executive recruiter for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And, in communicating my interest and what it is that I wanted to do, because I was very clear on the
mm-hmm.
type of I wanted to help on the work that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
He saw an opportunity where, he was building out a team.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first person he hired actually.
Oh wow.
Around coaching for job search. So he saw, it was a win-win opportunity for him because I get to help people who, wanted to make moves in their careers, and he wanted someone who had not necessarily a background in job search, but someone who was coming from a business background.
Interesting.
So that really was created through an informational interview.
Okay.
In terms of the sponsorship, so at the time I started out working as a consultant. The team or the HR team, they really at the early stage said that they weren't going to sponsor for the opportunity. But the reality was I delivered on the job. I built models, I built programs. I worked really hard, and a part of that, I really was enthusiastic about what I was doing. I cared about the work, and they saw that value, and they realized that that's a value that we want to keep, and that's how, after maybe 3 months, they were on board to sponsor my visa with them.
So did you join like as a temp or what? Because you mentioned like that conversation didn't happen until 3 months while you were there.
So I started as a consultant. So I was working with them.
Okay, I missed that part. Okay.
Yeah, and then eventually it transitioned into a full-time opportunity with them sponsoring.
Okay.
So something that, an important takeaway from this experience is that sometimes you're going to hear no. A company will tell you off the bat and they don't sponsor. But if they really, really want you, they will sponsor you, or they'll find a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really critical that you have advocates. You find that guardian angel within the company, and you build a relationship with that person so that person can go and back for you. And it's probably going to take a bit of observing, looking at the line and figuring out who has power and influence, within the company space that you want to do. Because it can't be just anybody. It obviously needs to be someone who has some level of either power or influence with the decision. You probably want to observe. In terms of the experience with working with a startup, things change rapidly. That's one of the things I'll probably say. So you can go to work tomorrow and you hear that the company is shifting in a different direction. And that usually happens for companies growing really quickly. And that was the case for SoFi. So I would not say that they shifted strategy. I think they were very clear on what it is that they wanted to deliver. It's just that timelines move more quickly. So you might have gotten a timeline to have something done in 3 months, and then tomorrow it needs to be done like tomorrow or yesterday. So being really agile, being able to think quickly on your feet, thinking outside the box, being creative, also wearing multiple hats. That's actually true. Because even though I started out as a career strategist and I was doing mainly job search coaching, I was doing stuff around process improvement. I was doing stuff around operations. I was doing data analytics stuff because we really need to analyze how we were performing. And I would probably even say I was doing like communication and marketing stuff too. So being able to be agile and flexible and just not sort of having an ego and thinking that what, this is my strength and this is what you hired me to do. I'm not going to do something else. Like if you really want to be successful in a startup, it's a all hands on deck mentality. And sometimes you might find yourself doing work that's not even, I did basic stuff like going and doing basic research, for example, which, an intern probably would do. And I also did really high level stuff like working on strategy that was presented to the board.
Okay.
So being able to adapt really swiftly is important.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a very good insight. It's one of the more unique and unheard stories, especially in the world when you listen to that. Oh, only the big companies sponsor and they don't. And yeah, I think you brought out a valid point that there are exceptions. If you have an advocate, they will bat for you. It's about that trust and confidence that it is.
That's the difference. And the other thing that I'll also say around sponsorship, which earlier, like, had I known this, I probably would have done it more.
Sure.
But as especially for international students, you're going to have the conversation about sponsorship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that some new regulations now where companies really can't ask if you need sponsorship or not. But if the conversation pops up, don't just let it go. Ask questions. If a company says that they don't sponsor and you find that you have a good relationship with, let's say, the hiring manager,
sure.
So you might want to ask, what about sponsorship makes you not do that, or what's the hesitation? Because sometimes in asking questions and digging deeper, you'll find out that some companies just don't have a clue about how the whole sponsorship works, or some people think that it's mostly experience. So sometimes it's more like a sales approach if you think about it. You're asking questions and you're educating in the same time. And who knows? You probably can shift the mindset really.
Yeah.
And it's also important for you to know how the sponsorship process works.
Yep.
But what companies need to do so that on the spot you can talk about that. And I had a perfect example with another client I worked with who needed sponsorship. And she was told that they're not going to sponsor, and she let the conversation go, and after a couple months, she brought it up again. And when she dug deeper, she found out that the truth is, because it was a very small company, the president thought it was ridiculously expensive. So what she did was she got an immigration attorney. I got him on the phone with the president to ask his questions, for the immigration attorney to go through the process and sort of lay some of the fears that they have. And they decided that they want to sponsor her, and they're going to move to the green card process. So sometimes you have to, might have to sort of push a little.
Push it a little, yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I think at this point we would like to wrap it up, but I would really like to thank you for your time. I think those were some really amazing insights and some crisp points to kind of think about a plan. And hopefully our listeners, I'll share your contact details, and if they have any further follow-up questions, they can reach out either to you or me over email. And
yeah, absolutely. It's always my pleasure to talk to Simon students. I wish you guys the best of luck as you go through either your full-time job search or internship search. All the very best. If you have questions, you can always reach out to me.
All right. Thanks, Benton. I'm just going to pause the screen now. Okay.